The crystal tray hit the marble floor with a sound so sharp, so final, that it silenced 200 voices at once. Champagne glasses hovered midair, laughter froze into awkward grimaces, and heads turned like synchronized clocks toward the woman kneeling on the ground. Shards glittered around her like broken stars, her hands trembled as she reached for the pieces. Her reflection splintered 100 times in the fragments. The murmur that ran through the ballroom wasn't sympathy, it was amusement. And then came the voice that sliced through the tension. "If you dance this waltz, I'll marry my son to you." William Thompson III, silver hair slicked back, skin flushed with whiskey, and ego inflated by decades of unchecked power, spoke loudly enough for every guest to hear. His champagne glass pointed like an accusing finger toward the woman on the floor. Gasps fluttered, followed by cruel chuckles. Jonathan Thompson, his son, shifted uneasily at his father's side. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," he whispered, his face burning with shame. "She just dropped a tray." But William ignored him. He was drunk not on alcohol alone, but on the intoxicating mixture of wealth, attention, and cruelty. "No, no. Let me finish," William said, stepping forward like an actor who owned the stage. His voice carried the authority of a man who believed himself untouchable. "This person doesn't have the coordination to clean, let alone entertain. Let's put it to the test. Can she even move to a beat?" Laughter rippled through the room. Kesha Williams, 35, still kneeling on the cold marble, lifted her head. Her eyes met Williams'. What he expected to find there, fear, humiliation, panic, was absent. Instead, her gaze was steady, unnervingly calm, as if she was weighing him, dissecting the cruelty behind the smile. The event manager moved forward, sweating. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps it would be better nothing." William cut him off. "Play a waltz. If she dances better than my wife, she marries my son tonight." Imagine Ida, the heir to the Thompson fortune, shackled to a cleaning lady. The laughter returned, louder now. Women covering their painted mouths as if shocked but enjoying the spectacle, men shaking their heads as though watching a comedy of errors. Kesha finally rose to her feet. She wiped her palms on the plain apron tied around her waist. Her voice, when it came, was so clear, so sharp, it cut through the hall like a blade. "I accept." The room gasped, even the orchestra faltered, strings whining into silence. William blinked, momentarily disarmed. "What did you say?" "I said I accept your challenge," Kesha repeated. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, the kind of smile that unnerved because it carried no desperation, no fear, only certainty. "But when I dance better than your wife, you'll keep your word, even if you spoke in jest." The crowd erupted into cruel laughter again, convinced they were about to witness the most humiliating downfall of the decade. But hidden behind that small smile was a secret, one no one in that room could have imagined. A secret with pointed shoes, velvet curtains, and standing ovations. William's wife, Victoria Thompson, elegant in emerald silk, stepped forward. 50 years old, sharp cheekbones, sharp tongue, and known throughout Manhattan's upper circles as the woman who offered ballroom lessons to the elite. She approached with a venomous smirk. "Darling," she purred, "surely you don't expect me to compete with this?" She flicked her wrist toward Kesha as though brushing dirt from her sleeve. "Don't be modest," William insisted. "You won that Club Waltz trophy last year. That should be more than enough." Kesha said nothing, though her silence was not submission. Her thoughts drifted backward, 15 years, to another name. Kesha Morrow, principal dancer with the American National Ballet, the prodigy critics hailed as a revelation. The ballerina who had flown across the world's greatest stages like a bird born for flight. Ovations that shook theaters, reviews that etched her into history, and then a one night of tragedy. A gala for the political elite, a limousine, screeching tires, a crash that left her body broken, 3 months in a coma. A prognosis so final it burned itself into her mind. "You'll be lucky if you walk again." Dance professionally, impossible. But here she was, walking, cleaning floors, living in the shadows of her former self. And now, fate had cornered her again. "Jonathan," William said, turning to his son with a wicked grin, "fetch your camera. Tonight deserves to be remembered as the day a cleaner pretended to be a dancer at my event." Jonathan hesitated, voice low, pleading. "Dad, This is cruel. She was just doing her job. She accepted the challenge. William cut him off sharply. Now she'll entertain us. Or would you rather I tell your girlfriend about last week? Jonathan's face blanched. Kesha's eyes flickered toward him. She recognized the silent chokehold of blackmail. William's cruelty spared no one. Put on the music, William barked at the DJ. And place your bets. $500 if my wife wins. $1,000 if anyone's brave enough to bet on the help. The room vibrated with cruel laughter again. Bills changed hands like poker chips. Victoria stretched theatrically, every gesture dripping with condescension. When you lose, William whispered into Kesha's ear, I want you on your knees, apologizing. And then, of course, you're fired. Something flickered in Kesha's eyes. Not fear, not resignation, determination. The same flame that had carried her across international stages. The same fire that had kept her alive when doctors told her she would never dance again. When I win, she said softly, her voice carrying across the room, I want more than your promise of marriage. Oh? William smirked. The help has demands? I want you to admit, in front of everyone here, that you judged me wrongly, for the color of my skin, for the work I do, and I want a public apology. A ripple of discomfort passed through the crowd. This was no longer a comedy. It was a duel. William laughed, though his voice cracked at the edges. You've got guts. Fine, but when you embarrass yourself, you'll leave with no job, no dignity, and no future. He thought he was in control. He thought he was the predator. But he didn't know who he was up against. Across the room, a man in a security uniform approached Kesha discreetly, pretending to check his radio. His voice was low, his eyes wide with disbelief. I know you, he whispered. 15 years ago. National Theater. Kesha Morrow, principal soloist. Kesha's chest tightened. After all these years, someone recognized her. They said you died in the accident, he whispered. The papers said many things, Kesha murmured. Not all true. His name tag read Marcus. His eyes carried both awe and loyalty. What they did to you was injustice. And what they're doing now a broken bar. He glanced toward William, still laughing. A broken bar is worse. Kesha's voice was steady. Marcus, after I dance, no matter what happens, record everything, especially their reactions. He frowned. Why? Because some lessons are only learned when the world sees the truth. Meanwhile, William turned the cruelty into spectacle. Let's make this fun, he shouted. If she finishes the song without falling, I'll give her $1,000. But if she fails, she'll clean this entire room, on her knees. More laughter, more bets, more cruelty. Jonathan spoke again, desperate. Dad, stop this. Shut up, William snapped. There's a natural order. People like her need to remember their place. Kesha began to stretch, not theatrically, not for show. Subtle movements, barely noticeably unless you knew. Marcus noticed, his breath caught. My God, he whispered. She's really going to do this. Victoria stepped forward. Start the music, she commanded. Let's end this charade. The DJ reluctantly obeyed, and a waltz filled the air. Victoria danced first, executing polished but mechanical ballroom steps. The crowd clapped politely, though their eyes drifted toward the woman waiting in the corner. Then it was Kesha's turn. She stepped onto the floor with deliberate grace. Each movement calm, measured, controlled. The DJ asked, what song do you want? The same one, she said, from the beginning. William sneered. Oh, she wants a second chance. Fine, play it again. Let's see how long she lasts. What none of them knew was that this waltz was her old friend. She had danced it hundreds of times. It lived in her muscle memory, in her soul. It was the piece that had earned her standing ovations before tragedy stole her stage. The music began. Kesha closed her eyes. And when she opened them, the world shifted. Her first movements were subtle, restrained. Then, as the melody swelled, she unleashed years of buried brilliance. Every step, every turn, every movement flowed with impossible precision. She wasn't dancing a waltz. She was resurrecting herself. Gasps replaced laughter. She's incredible, someone whispered. Victoria froze, her smirk fading. William's grin collapsed into disbelief. Kesha leapt into a grand jet copyright, defying gravity, her body arching with a freedom that mocked every limitation fate had tried to place on her. Pirouettes spun into perfection. Tilde copyright tests cracked like whips, unending, impossible. The musicians themselves faltered, their hands trembling, realizing the woman was dancing at a level far beyond any ballroom hobbyist. This was mastery. This was art. The room had fallen silent. The only sound was the music and the sound of arrogance shattering. When the final note struck, Kesha froze in her signature pose, arms extended, chin lifted, a goddess carved in living motion. Silence, then applause, slow, tentative, then thunderous, rising into a roar that shook the chandeliers. Guests leapt to their feet, shouting, clapping, some even crying. William sat pale, trembling, destroyed. Marcus stepped forward, raising his phone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang out, "allow me to introduce Kesha Morrow, former principal soloist of the American National Ballet." The name fell like a bomb. Gasps, cries, disbelief. "No," Victoria stammered, "that's impossible. Kesha Morrow is dead." "Clearly," Kesha said, her voice steady, "rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated." Laughter and applause shook the room, but William Thompson did not laugh. His empire of arrogance had just crumbled in front of Manhattan's elite, and the night was only beginning. The applause thundered, rolling through the ballroom like a storm breaking after unbearable heat. People rose from their seats, shouting bravo, clapping until their hands stung. It wasn't polite applause, it was the sound of an audience realizing they had nearly missed a miracle. Kesha remained still in the center of the dance floor. She stood like a statue carved from fire and grace, her arms still poised in that final gesture. Her chest rose and fell evenly, no trace of exhaustion, only dignity. For a heartbeat, her eyes found William Thompson's. He sat in his gilded chair, glass of champagne forgotten in his hand, face drained of color. The predator looked small now, cornered, caught in his own trap. Marcus's voice cut through the din, steady and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed the return of Kesha Morrow, a former principal soloist of the American National Ballet." The room gasped. A woman in pearls clutched her husband's arm. "My God, it is her. I saw her at the National Theater before the accident. I thought she was dead." Another guest whispered. "They said she'd never walk again." But here she was. Victoria Thompson's face contorted, the venomous confidence draining. "This is absurd," she hissed. "She's an imposter. Kesha Morrow hasn't danced in years. She's a cleanra." "Enough." Kesha's voice rang like steel. Calm, cutting. Her eyes, locked on Victoria's, left no room for denial. "You know the truth. Everyone in this room knows it now." William slammed his glass onto the table, shattering it. "This is a trick," he barked. "A broken bar, cruel performance to humiliate me in my own house." But the murmurs spreading across the crowd told a different story. Respect, awe, guilt. Some of Manhattan's elite were already realizing they had laughed at a legend. Jonathan Thompson stepped forward, the phone in his hands still recording. His face was pale, but his eyes glowed with something fierce. "Dad, enough. You made a promise. You said if she danced better than Mom, I'd marry her." "Jonathan," Victoria's voice cracked, "don't you dare." "Why not?" Jonathan's voice rose, sharp for the first time that night. He looked around the ballroom, at the faces turned toward him. "We all saw it. We all know it. She's not just better. She's beyond anything we've ever seen. And he turned to his father. "You humiliated her, mocked her, used her as a prop for your cruelty. The only fool tonight is you." The crowd murmured louder. Some nodded, some looked away, ashamed. William's jaw tightened. He stood, trembling with rage. "You ungrateful little boy. You think you can lecture me? In my house? I built everything you stand in awe. You built it on arrogance." Jonathan cut in, his voice steady now. "On treating people like dirt. But not tonight. Tonight, you lost." William's hand twitched as if he might strike his son. Gasps rippled through the audience. But before he could act, Kesha stepped forward. Her presence stopped him cold. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone calm, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "you made a promise. And unlike you, I intend to hold you to it. You will acknowledge your words. You will admit that you judged me wrongly. And you will apologize not only to me, but to every person you ever taught to laugh at someone they believed beneath them. The room went still. William laughed a bitter, desperate sound. You think you can command me? His face twisted. You're nothing. You're a has-been dancer, a cleaner. You'll crawl back to the shadows where you belong. Kesha's smile was soft, almost pitying. That's where you're wrong. I've already lost everything once, and I survived. You, William Thompson, have everything to lose tonight. She nodded to Marcus. Marcus lifted his phone, screen glowing. Already live streaming, he announced. Thousands watching already. Every word you said, every bet you took, every laugh. The blood drained from William's face. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Some guests horrified, some delighted, some trying desperately to slip away before being caught on camera. You wouldn't dare? William snarled. Kesha stepped closer, her voice dropping low enough for only him to hear. I already did. He staggered back, the mask of power crumbling. For the first time in decades, William Thompson looked small. Jonathan faced Kesha, his eyes searching hers. Miss Morrow, he said softly, on behalf of my family, I am deeply, deeply sorry. Kesha studied him. Unlike his father, Jonathan's apology carried no performance, no calculation, just shame and sincerity. You are not your father, she said finally, but you will decide what kind of man you want to be. Victoria lunged forward, desperation cracking her perfect composure. This is madness. We won't let some broken bar some nobody humiliate us like this. Nobody. Kesha's voice cut sharp. She lifted her chin, her presence filling the room like a tidal wave. I was somebody long before you stepped onto a ballroom floor, Mrs. Thompson, and I will be somebody long after your name is forgotten. Applause erupted again, spontaneous, unstoppable. Not just for her dancia but for her defiance. William roared, slamming his fist against the table. Enough. Everyone out. Now. Party's over. But no one moved. The guests remained where they were, watching, recording, whispering. The tide had turned. Kesha turned toward Marcus. You have what you need? Every second, Marcus confirmed. The world will see this. William lunged toward him, face twisted with rage. But Marcus was faster. Security men stepped forward, and not for William, but against him. For years, they had swallowed his cruelty. Tonight, they saw weakness. Tonight, they saw someone worth standing with. Jonathan spoke again, his voice carrying over the murmurs. Father, if you don't apologize, I will, and I will walk out of this family tonight. Gasps. Victoria clutched her pearls, horror-stricken. Jonathan, no. But Jonathan's eyes stayed locked on Kesha's. I won't be your puppet anymore, not if it means being like you. The ballroom held its breath. William's lips trembled. For a moment, he looked like he might explode again, but the weight of 200 eyes, the flashing cameras, the recording phones, the world watching on linear, it broke him. He sagged into his chair, defeated. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. A broken bar apologized. The room froze. To her, Jonathan insisted. William's eyes burned with hate, but he forced the words out, each one cutting his pride to ribbons. I apologize. A broken bar, Miss Morrow, for a broken bar misjudging you. Silence followed. Then laughter, but not the cruel laughter of before. This was different. Nervous, disbelieving. The great William Thompson, humiliated in his own ballroom. Kesha inclined her head, regal as a queen accepting tribute. Apology accepted, but forgiveness? That will take time. Applause roared again, shaking the chandeliers. Some guests even cheered. Phones captured every moment, streaming it out into a world hungry for stories of the mighty brought low. William slumped, broken. Victoria's face crumbled, her vanity shattered. Jonathan stood taller than he ever had in his life, and Kesha stood in the center, bathed in applause. No longer a cleaner, no longer a ghost of her former self. She was reborn. Later, as the crowd dispersed, some ashamed, some thrilled, some already plotting how to align themselves with hero, Kesha found herself alone near the shattered crystals still lying on the marble floor. Jonathan approached quietly. Miss Morrow, he said. His voice was careful, respectful. I don't know what happens next, but I know things. I want to be different, better. I don't want to be him. Kesha studied him, then smiled faintly. Then don't. The choice is yours. Marcus joined them, phone still in hand. "The video's already everywhere," he said. "By morning, the whole country will know, maybe the world." Kesha bent, picking up a fragment of glass. She held it up, the light fracturing into 1,000 colors. "Good," she whispered. "Let them see." For years, she had lived in the shadows, broken and forgotten. Tonight, she stepped back into the light, not just as a dancer, not just as a survivor, but as a force the world could no longer ignore. And William Thompson, the man who thought himself untouchable, had learned the cost of underestimating her, because some lessons can only be taught in the language of humiliation, and some victories are written not in contracts or fortunes, but in dignity reclaimed. As Kesha left the ballroom, heads turned, whispers followed, and respect bloomed where scorn had lived. For the first time in 15 years, she walked tall, and this time, she wasn't walking alone.